right now.
There we go. Good afternoon. It's Thursday, February 9th. Senate Institutions. We have the pleasure of having the room filled. We're going to start the day off with Amanda Wolford, Director of Women's Services, Maine Department of Corrections. Amanda, welcome to Senate Institutions. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
Yep. So the floor is yours.
Well, I'm here to really answer the questions of your committee. Happy to go over some of the things that I spoke about last week, if there's new folks in the room. But any questions that you have of our design, of our programming, anything's on the table. So please hit me rapid fire style.
We would love to have you tell us what you want to tell us. If you are, maybe you're not prepared.
No, I can just say, Amanda, this is a completely separate committee from last week.
Okay.
So just basically the same presentation you gave HCI. Background.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I did not get that information, so I apologize. I thought I was coming back to answer more questions in front of the folks that I had met with. So I apologize for not being as prepared as you might like, but I'll roll with it. And then, like I said, please interrupt me at any time and ask me any questions. But to just give a general overview of what we have here in Maine. So our campus is comprised of, I would break it down into 3 facilities. We have a co-located male and female secure facility. So that meaning it's surrounded by a fence. Within that confinement, we have about 600 beds total for both the male and the female population. As you and I speak today, I have about 150 women total in custody in both the secure and unsecure facilities. My unsecure facility is the Southern Maine Women's Reentry Center. Many of folks from Vermont have visited that facility. That is a 100-bed facility that we opened in 2017. That building opening was our 3rd iteration here in the state of a women's reentry center. We kept having the need to grow our facility. So we started as a 32-bed facility in what I'd call a hallway of our one of our older mental health facilities, Dorothea Dix up in Bangor. We quickly grew and needed double that capacity. So we moved to an annex building in Alfred, which is the county as you enter the state from the New Hampshire, Massachusetts direction. That gave us a 68-bed facility, and we further needed to grow due to the increase, 1 of our population and 2 of our need for minimum beds. So we had plenty of beds within the system. I shouldn't say plenty. It really depends on the year, right? So we had a need for more minimum security beds. So that's where the 100-bed Southern Maine Women's Reentry Center came to fruition. So that program is like I mentioned, an unfenced facility. The design itself is very much a residential design. It is stick build, so no brick and mortar. So it was much cheaper for us to stand up and be able to get to the 100-bed capacity that we were able to get to through budgeting. We were able to really expand that. They had originally only slated us for a 75-bed facility with the option to expand down the road if we had the need. But through the construction process, we found that we would actually have the budget to put those beds in now. So we took advantage of that opportunity back in 2016, 2017. So in March of 2017 is when we opened that building. So that building is coming up on its 6th year of being open. Like I said, it's 100 beds. Right now, as you and I speak today, I've only got 71 women inside of there. I've got another 75, 76 women up the hill in the secure area. I can hold a total of upwards of 250 women if the need should be there. I don't have that need. Obviously, a lot of things with COVID and some policies within our communities have changed the population in the last few years, but I have seen our population as high as about 240. And that was back in 2016, 2017, when we really saw the rise of the opioid epidemic hit our state. So sentencing and charges still look very similar for what the women are coming in for in 2023 as they were in 2017, mostly drug-related crimes. So a lot of theft, a lot of trafficking, and kind of the ancillary charges that come along with that lifestyle. So that's really what we focus on, knowing that our population has a very high need for substance use treatment. We have a very large co-occurring, meaning a mental health diagnosis and a substance use issue, along with some acuity issues that we've been dealing with throughout the years. As we've seen residential substance use and mental health facilities close in our communities, we've seen a larger need for those services within our walls. So that's really our population really runs the gamut of needs, whether it be medical, mental health. We obviously, Maine is a very old state. Our average population for our women's population is about 38. So we have an aging population. We were very short-sighted, I feel, when we built the Women's Center. So the Women's Center is separate from the Southern Maine Reentry Center. The Women's Center was built in 2002, and that at the time was state-of-the-art, gender responsive, trauma informed. This space is full of light, there's windows, and it's a dormitory style housing unit. You have shared rooms with a co-located bathroom down the walk. So there's not those traditional wet cells that you would see in a traditional walk-up style where you have the metal doors. We do have a unit that's like that. That's where our intake unit is, but the Women's Center is a much, more welcoming space. So a lot of our treatment happens there. But again, we were a little short-sighted, I feel. I wasn't around when they designed that building, but it lacks medical space. It lacks treatment space. There is one room that is slated for both visitation and programming for the entire population, which obviously, if you have a very high needs population, one room is just not going to cut it. So if you've ever toured through there, if you'd ever like to tour through there, you'll see basically every other space is a convertible space. We've put TVs in our chow halls. We've put up whiteboards so we can do programming in our chow halls and in our break rooms. We really needed to make the best of that space. But as issues come up, we're seeing the need for in a more acute area for our mentally ill. And we have some pretty significantly mentally ill women within our population. We've had to kind of adjust some of our staffing needs. So we've created what we call correctional acuity specialists. So those are folks who are trained at just a little higher level that can deal with, the population with, significant mental illness during the day, so that they're not isolated, they're not locked away, that they're getting programming and integration in a way that's healthy for them. So we've had to make some adjustments and make the space what it is. Obviously, space for infirmary is tricky as well. We do have one specific area that we can use. I've only got 2 rooms within the entire unit that are large enough for hospital style beds. So if there's any need above 2, I'm kind of in a pickle. So those are some of the nuances and some of those, challenges that, you may not have thought of on the onset of building something, but definitely came up because when they were building the Women's Center, they were under the impression that all the women that came through those doors that would need medical services would just go to the Maine State Prison's infirmary. So the Maine State Prison is about a 2.5-hour drive from our Windham campus, and it's an all-male facility. So if any woman would ever have to go there, she would be completely isolated. So obviously that would be worst case scenario. And what we were asking of our population is that they would go be sick by themselves, which is kind of a cruddy thing to ask of somebody, especially somebody who's doing life, who's developed, friends and family in a facility. Those are really all they have. These are folks that you don't typically get visits. They're not having loved ones who write letters and things like that. So it was kind of a sad situation. So we've kind of had to adjust course and again, make the most out of what we have for space. So we've done just that. We did have a resident pass about a year ago, and she stayed within the population. And I got cards and letters from a family who never even came to visit, just thanking me for allowing her to die with dignity. So that's really what that move was about. So there's definitely positives about that facility. Like I said, we have a whole wall of light. It's bright. We have had a new build here on the campus here in Windham. Alan has seen some of it. So we have, and I don't recommend this, but built a new facility around an old facility. And that's come with some of its challenges, but what it came with was the ability to build a new programs building. So within that programs building, there's now space for the amount of programming that we really needed and the amount of education that we wanted to expand. And we were able to build that building with the infrastructure, meaning the cables are, the internet is already run. We didn't have to go chisel through cement block to bring in technology. Those things were already there when we moved in, which has been a blessing because that's really the way the world has gone, especially through COVID, is the digital and the Zoom, right? So we have populations that can, attend class remotely, and that opens up a lot more opportunities for this population. So that education building also has a gymnasium. So until last August, the women never had access to a gymnasium. They didn't have access to a ball field. There was just a lot of things that they did not have access to because they were kind of squared off in the back of this main campus here in Windham. So it's really been a blessing to have all of these options and educational and physical experiences open up. There's a full weight room, there's a cardio room, there's a full library, just all these things that, I wish the women had access to 50 years ago. But here in Maine, the women have moved quite frequently. Well, I shouldn't say quite frequently, but they move into spaces that were no longer occupied by men. So previous to the Women's Center opening in 2002, they never had a space of their own. They were always kind of moved throughout the state in whatever space that the men didn't need to occupy at the time. So they've been up in Charleston, and they were in a dorm in the back of the Windham campus before the Women's Center was built. That was, really in the middle of the campus, and there was male housing all the way around them. So not really ideal for learning when you know what we know now about trauma and how that when folks feel triggered, they're not learning and they're not healing and they're not getting better and they're not going to be well. So moving them in the back, building their own space, even with the short site, it was much better than where we had come from. So I'm grateful for all those opportunities. And then we did one better when we built the reentry center. We knew about the light and we knew about the colors. And I was co-host, so I let Kathy in. I hope it's okay that she's coming in. This is what happens when you put me in charge of things. So we were able to go one better with the reentry center. We started that build with the idea of having those spaces, those program spaces built in, that we did not need to convert, the chow halls into a program space. We have outside space. All of the walks have access to just walk outside. There's no fence around that building. The visitation area is only supervised by passive supervision. So an officer does not sit in that visit room. They only walk by every 15 minutes just to check in on the situation. Families can bring food in. They can go outside. There's picnic tables, when the weather's nice. Same thing for our chow halls. You can opt to eat inside or outside. And it's just, we call it an active facility because, any given time of the day, even in the middle of the night, there's people up doing stuff because that's just, some people are, night owls and they get more done in the evening hours, or they choose to work in the evening. So we have employers that actually come and pick up the employees at our facility. You can work as long as you have 2 years or less left on your sentence. You can be community custody, so you can go out to community employers. You can come down to the reentry center at 5 years or less left on your sentence. So that's kind of what gets you there. A lot of people ask about, well, how do you earn your way down there? Well, there's really no earning your way down there. Once we classify you, and if your classification is minimum, you're able to move, as long as we've conducted all of the, you know, the assessments that we need to. So our risk assessment, medical, education, once we know who you are and what you need, we're going to put you in the appropriate housing. You know, we have research that says, you know, if you put a low custody resident with a high custody resident, you're going to have poor outcomes. With that low custody, they're going to pick up those bad habits. So we don't want to do that. We want to get people in the right spaces and get them busy, and really get them rehabilitated and well again. And that's really our goal. So I'll stop talking for a minute because I feel like I sucked the oxygen out of the room, even though I'm not with you guys. But please ask any questions of what I've just kind of described.
So are there any, so the patients that might have some mental health difficulties, are there, in the reentry program, are there any divisions as far as who you match people up with? Are there any precautions to, you know, for everybody, or how does that work?
So if we have somebody who's acutely mentally ill, we probably won't place them at the reentry center. They need to be in more of a secure setting. If you're talking about somebody who might be, you know, violent, or, you know, we've even temporarily had to move people because of psychosis. They did not have issues, but there was some medication changes that caused psychosis. And I didn't want anybody to like wake up in the middle of the night. You could literally walk off the campus at the reentry center. So we don't want any of those things to happen. So really it comes down to safety. If somebody can be safe and they just need extra support, we would set up a plan that you meet with a mental health counselor once a week, and you might check in with peer supports every other day. And then you would have some, you know, individualized programming that would go along with it. But when you're talking about somebody who's significantly mentally ill, that's not really the population we're talking about. That would be down at the reentry center.
What's the, when you put them on the work release, when they pick them up, the employer picks them up, brings them to work, what's a lot of violations of running away or something, or they abide by the rules pretty well?
No, they really abide by the rules pretty well. I've been in my position for about 12 years and I've never had to walk away from a job.
Wow, that's a great record.
So where we're learning from you, you know, we're trying to reimagine about what, you know, how we can be proactive as you are. Who did you learn from? What model does this follow, or is this what you came up with?
This was, you know, we had the Women's Center that, again, this was built in 2002. I had not yet finished high school, so I was not around for those conversations, but we knew what we knew about the Women's Center. We knew we had to go a little deeper. We knew we needed a little bit more space. We knew we needed more program space. You know, you learn a lot in 20 years. You know, you come a long way with the ideas of how you want to treat people and what do you want to see, you know, and you take in all the factors of our, you know, accreditations and things like that, and what's going to make your life easier. You know, this PREA, this Prison Rape Elimination Act, you know, all those laws and the standards that come along with that, you know, just thinking through those things as you design a place. You know, one of the things that always was so jarring to the population is that every time a man walked into a female unit, you had to announce yourself. So you had to scream "man on the walk" every single time. And I was like, God, like, that is just really jarring. So building the reentry center, I'm like, is there another way we can do this? Is there, you know, an easier way? So at the beginning of our once you walk into the housing, there's kind of double doors that kind of delineate the office space and the program space from the housing unit. There is a doorbell, and you hit the doorbell, and it's a, you know, mellow chime, and then we have a flashing light for anybody who's hearing impaired, and that's it. We don't have to yell "man on the walk" every single time, and just removing those barriers and just those things that kind of always didn't feel so great. You know, we learned from ourselves, really, and we learned from you know, taking the standards that have kind of had come along in those past 20 years of you know, best practice and things like that, and we were able just to like dump it all into one pile. And we worked with an architect that really was listening to us and asked us good questions about like even placement of light switches and things like that, and placement of the outlets, the jacks for the rooms for TVs. You know, we always, if you walk into any prison cell in America right now, you got two people sharing space on one little desk. And then you got usually 2 TVs, any educational stuff stacked right up. It just looks like a mess. So we went ahead and we put shelves in at, you know, a higher level in front of the beds with the jacks for the TVs right there. So we don't have all that clutter on the desk. The desk is there for reading and working on their homework and doing and the things that a desk is made for, not for just piles of clutter. You know, you want people to feel like this is and have ownership of their space. You know, we put a big picture window in every single room. We want them to have natural light. We want them to not feel the depression of the winter when, you know, the days are longer and the sun goes down. We want them to all the things that make you and I feel happy when we go outside on a summer day and you feel that heat on your face, like all those things that we just take for granted. We really just, we're really thoughtful about in this process. And I'm grateful that I was able to go through that process.
So as far as when you started this program and stuff, I'm sure that you've got a lot of pushback from the public that you're being too nice and this is not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, do you still get that kind of pressures, or did you ever get those pressures before? Did you have to prove yourself that this could work?
Oh, I always have to prove myself, and that's okay. Really, what we did at the beginning is we had a town hall meeting. And when I say town hall, I mean like a true town hall meeting. We invited the community in and we said, this is what we're trying to do. And these are the reasons why. And when you stand up in front of somebody, you got to bring the research and you got to bring the rationale, because they don't know me from Adam. So who am I? So what I did was I brought the folks who I was working with, the partners down at the other reentry center. I brought the employers from that community, and those employers were the ones that said, no, you want these women up here. You want this space because these are the best employees I have. We don't have issues. We don't have calls for service. When the community police, they don't show up to our facility. I mean, we're not calling them for service. If anything, we're there as a support for them. We don't draw attention to ourselves. We're very subdued. We don't have this big razor wire and neon sign on directly on River Road, and everybody who's driving from Portland in town doesn't see this obtrusive type of facility just in a sore thumb. We did not want to be a sore thumb in this community. So we brought them in. What are your concerns? They very much said, stay on your side of the road. So we had to get creative about where we put the facility, even though we own all the fields around us. We have directly across the street from us is a residential community. And we have fields up there, and all those fields are now garden space. But they were pretty clear, it's fine that you're here, but just stay on that side of the road. And we respected that, even though it's much better property over there. It was flat and it's not full of rocks, and we didn't have to pay fines for, wetlands or anything like that. But we respected that. And, the biggest issue we have right now is the staff who drive through that community to get to work every day. Every once in a while, I got to go and shake my finger and tell them to slow down. It's a residential community. Like, you need to leave your house 5 minutes early or stop buzzing through. And they're good about that. They pick up the phone. It's like, hey, this is the license plate. And they're like, yep, we're on it. So just being good neighbors, I think was really the part of that I think was the most important in coming out ahead of it and not waiting until there was, the pitchforks and the, folks standing at my door saying, we don't want you here and here's why. Get out ahead of it and have those conversations, and bringing up those folks from before, that have been working with us and saying they're great to work with. It's, they've spent 3,000 hours in our food pantry helping us organize, in the last year and a half. Like, they're great partners to have in your community, because we have folks who can't work and need to volunteer because they're that I said that they can come down at 5 years, but they can't work until 2 years. So we got 3 years of folks who can do a lot of community service. We have a horse farm across the street from us. They go and work with the horses. They're mucking stalls when it was I think -45 last weekend, and they're out shoveling horse doo-doo and taking care of those horses like they were their own. And it's so therapeutic for them. It's a great relationship. Who wouldn't want to work with horses? It's just, these are horses that are rescued. So the women see a lot of parallel in themselves in these horses, and it's been a really great relationship. But it's really, and that's really what I'll stop at that and just say it's relationship building.
What's the size of the population for where you're located around you? What's the?
Oh, you had to ask.
100,000?
I would say a little less than that. We are a suburb of Portland. So Wyndham is about 15 minutes due west of Portland. So there's a major kind of throughway from Portland to kind of Western Maine, and that's 302. And that's kind of what runs right in front of us. So we do have quite a bit of foot traffic in front of our building. And I'll say that to say we don't have a bunch of drugs thrown into our parking lot either, because that was one of the things like, well, you're right on the main. We have our security and our perimeter teams that go around, but we really don't have the drug problems that I think many people would assume that, an unfenced facility would have.
You certainly have the need for, the community certainly has the need for the women power that you're providing within the community to fill some of these jobs. And it's not just, I imagine it's a wide variety of work that's required. So it's not just cashier or whatever. There's hopefully there's jobs
Absolutely.
that they can transition to after they're released, and maybe and how do they get paid?
So they make the same wage you or I would make at any of these employers. And you're right, the variety of jobs that they're in. Some women build windows. Some women, we have 8 going through their welding certification right now. And we have 3 construction companies just within a 15-mile radius that says, I will hire every single one of those women as soon as they have that certificate in their hand. And furthermore, if they get there's an extra training for stainless steel, I'll give them an extra $3 an hour. So there's a huge need in the construction and trades that the women really never thought were an option. And we have a phenomenal VTI. Her name is Corinne, and she's really opened the door to a lot of these women in these non-traditional work environments. And the women are making a living wage rather than minimum wage, because there's a difference between the two.
Do they have unfettered access to their cash after they come in, or do you control the access to that?
No, so their paychecks come through our business office. We take out fines and fees, whatever they owe the courts, at a percentage rate per check. So each check is docked 25% towards their, so any monies that are coming in, whether a loved one sends it in or whether it's an earned paycheck. And then they pay 10% room and board. And that does not come to the Department of Corrections. That goes into what's called the general fund for the entire state. So that 10% goes back into the general fund.
And do they pay, are they charged in excess to general rooms and board whether they're working or not? Is that something that they have a bill or that's just if they're in a work program?
That's only if they're in a work program, correct. And they were paying a little bit more, but we reduced it because they were having to pay their own transportation. So it was reduced from 15 to 10% to cover that gap.
Wendy, I'm sorry.
No, good questions. And thank you for being here. So is this the only women's facility in Maine?
Yes, yeah, we have the Secure and the pre-release. Those are the only 2 women's facilities in Maine, and they sit within 40 yards of each other.
Great. And then are you having trouble staffing that facility or the other facilities? Or are you just in charge of the women's, or do you do the men's also?
Well, so yeah, actually all of our facilities, all 7 of our facilities within the DOC are having staffing challenges. We've seen those get a lot better within the past 9 to 12 months. Things have slowly, incrementally gotten better for us. We were down to about 50% staffing levels when things were at their worst last winter. But yeah, things are slowly starting to bounce back. We've changed some of our recruiting strategies. We've changed some of the strategies that we use with our academy. We have had to increase our pay and bring people in at a higher step rather than the step 1, just to be competitive with the market. So that we did have to make some adjustments to help bring those folks in. But things are definitely, there's market improvement since probably the last 9 to 12 months.
That's great. The welding program and just construction in general sounds really interesting, and obviously something that we could use. Are there when you say programming, is that only in the reentry facility, or do you have any programming or education in the regular? Or the
Yep,
women's-
so up
I'm sorry, what do
within
you
the
call it? Women's center.
Yeah, the Women's Center. Yeah, so we have just as many educational opportunities. It doesn't matter what facility you're in, because like I said, the remote learning really opens up a lot of doors, and doesn't really matter where you live. Obviously, the community-based training, like the welding program, which is at a community college, those are opportunities for the pre-release, because they're able to leave the site every day and travel to the community college and then come home. But yes, we have. But when you're talking about programming, I mean, we run the gamut. So we have a very intensive trauma-based substance use program that, you know, like I said, about 75 to 80% of our population is coming in with some level of substance use need. So obviously that program is there. Healthy relationships. We do a lot of work around trauma, because we have a very well-versed behavioral health director, Dr. Berard, and she really, on a quarterly basis, pulls our risk assessment apart to see who our population is, to make sure that we're offering the appropriate programming for who we have in our care. She recently did a deep dive and found that there was not one woman in our custody that had less than 4 ACEs. So I don't know if those of you who aren't familiar with what an ACE is, and that's an adverse childhood experience. So an adverse childhood experience could be a traumatic experience that, you know, it can vary. You know, you watch your mom be abused by your father. You were abandoned as a child. You were in the foster care system. So all these things that happened to you as a child obviously build up to who you become as an adult. And every time one of those things happen, it's called an ACE. So the higher your ACE score, the more likely you are to be, you know, justice involved later as an adult. So it's pretty remarkable to hear that no one in our custody had an ACE score lower than 4. And it really unfortunate is really what it was. But it told us that we really needed to address the trauma harder than what we were. We always knew we needed to be trauma informed, right? We shouldn't be screaming at people and slamming doors and things like that. And but it really showed us that our treatment needed to be seated in a trauma response. We needed to address the reasons people were using, and not just putting a Band-Aid on the use itself. So if we can, you know, even go upstream a little bit and address those issues that cause somebody to use, obviously the outcomes are better and longer lasting.
All right, thanks. And then just a couple more questions. Do you have detainees in the population too?
No, these are all sentenced individuals. So our length of sentence varies from 9 months and a day. So that's what you need to have to come stateside to life. And we do have a handful of women serving life, whether it's natural life, because that's what the sentence said, or they were given so many years, and given their age, it's just an assumption that they will pass with us.
Wow. So how do you handle detainees? Do you have jails, like county jails?
Yep, our county jail system.
Okay. And then do you have a reentry center for men that's similar?
We have 3 throughout the state. We have one in it's called Bolduc, and it's about a mile down the road from our main state prison, which is our biggest facility in the state. We have one up in Mountain View at the Charleston site, which is right outside of Bangor. And then our third one is in the Down East community in Machiasport, which is a hike, pack a lunch. It's quite a drive, but we did try, I'm not sure if we had closed that facility down for a period of time. But there was so much community outrage because we took so many employees out of that very small community, which relies on that facility for agricultural, blueberries, potatoes, that there was a lot of pressure to reopen that facility. And just the background to that, we were not able to reopen the actual facility because it was so far condemned. It was originally an Air Force base, I believe, or some type of military base. But the amount of work that would have had to have gone into that to make it safe again, lead pipes, asbestos, all those good things that come with older builds, it was actually cheaper for us to build another stick build for that facility up there.
Wow, that's wild that the community was unhappy that a detention facility.
Very much so.
That's pretty wild. And then I guess one thing, and this might be a question for later for our staff, is just, have we compared the costs of the Maine way and the Vermont way? Or is somebody looking at that? Or I'm sure we can look at that. I mean, I would expect to be able to answer that now, but that would just be something helpful.
I think, sorry. Amanda, if you could just talk about the cost of the stick build for the reentry and then what your programming building just costs roughly.
Sure. So you have to keep in mind that was built during COVID. So that take whatever you think is normal and just throw it out the window. So the stick build for a 100-bed facility down at the reentry center cost a little under $10 million. So it was like 9.6 million for the 100-bed facility. And that, again, that had all the bells and whistles. I mean, obviously it goes out to bid, but when I say bells and whistles, I say, we had brought technology in at the forefront. So we had it wired for Wi-Fi and things like that ahead of time. So it was much cheaper than going back and having to build up that infrastructure. The programs building that we just put up, I believe, I'm gonna botch numbers, but it was part of a bigger build. So it wasn't just a program building. I think Alan, I think I gave you that number at one point. Is it like 64 million? 12. Okay, so I think maybe the whole build was 64 million, and then that programs building was around 12-13 million dollars for just the program space. So within that program building, like I said, our educational classrooms, our gymnasium, we have a barber, we have a library, we have a music room, we have an annex, we have our disciplinary captains, we have office space for those folks who run the programming, and it's got a total of 2, 4, 6, 8, I think 12 classrooms within that building, and that's a shared building with the male and the female population. So through scheduling, and then there's 2 different spaces, 2 different ways to get into this building. So if you come in the back way, it directly leads you to the women's center. If you come in the front door, it's from the male population, so they don't ever have to cross to get to the classroom space. And then, like I said, through scheduling, we schedule the times for the recreation spaces.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Amanda, this is pretty impressive. It seems like you got this thing figured out pretty well. I wanted to ask, in terms of programming, post-release, do some of the women come back and work at the facility, or have you ever used them as sort of counselors for the folks that are still there?
So yes, we have a partnership with NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness here in the state of Maine. They become employees of NAMI, and they come in as peer support. So they run mental health programming. So they run mental health first aid. They run a choices class, and they do one-on-one peer supports. So those were 2 full-time staff members. So we had one up the hill at the main facility and one down at the reentry center. And like I said, those are 40-hour positions. They made the same money. They were paid the same, and had benefit packages through NAMI as well. We also, as frequently as I can, I do put previously incarcerated folks on my interview panels when it comes, especially like my casework staff, things like that, because who knows them better than them? So they know what they're looking for in a staff member. They know when they're being bamboozled pretty well. I mean, obviously these are people who either did phenomenal within our walls and obviously stay in touch with us. So they, I can get a hold of them to say, hey, can you do, a round of interviews next Tuesday? Yeah, absolutely. Let me just take the day off or whatever I got going on. But yeah, we also have what's called the Maine Prisoner Reentry Network. So this is an outside organization that trains folks in peer recovery and just peer mentoring models. And I just signed off today on someone to come in who has been released and doing really well. And yeah, she's going to come in to do, they come in, they do AA, they do NA, they do the peer supports, and they help a lot with that, especially around the reentry stress. Like, it's that lived experience that really, makes them a credible messenger where, you know, you or I can sit there and say, well, just do well. And they're like, okay, yeah, easier said than done. You know, these are folks who can come in and say, you know, this is where I really struggled, but here, this is a resource that I use and it was really helpful. So let me put you in contact with them. So that partnership has been, you know, just invaluable.
Thank you. How do you handle the drug? Of course, you know, so many people in jail for drugs now. It's terrible. I mean, it's driven up our population. But in Maine, if you come in addicted to drugs, do you go out addicted to drugs in any way, shape, or form? Or you come in addicted to opioids? When you go out of jail, are you still using any type of methadone or anything like that? How does that happen in Maine?
Yep. So we have universal MAT, and the MAT is determined by the provider. So we don't just say, here, we just do Suboxone. We do, if it's methadone, that works better for you. If it's Vivitrol, you know, if it's the shot that's needed, because, you know, you just can't seem to get to the methadone clinic in the community. You know, we look at the person holistically and see, you know, is this somebody who can get up and get to an appointment every day? If it's not, then methadone's not for them, right? Like that's not a great path to walk somebody down because it's a setup for failure, right? But it comes with a whole host of things, right? We're really looking at overall wellness. And a lot of times when folks get on the medications that they need, whether it's, you know, for anxiety and things like that, you see a lot of the cravings, you know, for that, you know, like lack of a better term, they were self-medicating with illicit drugs because they did not have access or they did not know how to access appropriate mental health treatment or appropriate medical treatment. So that you see a lot of folks really starting to really pay attention to listen to their bodies. You know, just as an aside, women put in about 7 times more sick call slips than men do. So they see, unfortunately, they see prison as a way to start to get well again. You know, they want to be seen by the providers. They want to get their teeth fixed. They want, you know, I'm not able to read past an 8th grade level. Well, your eyes haven't been, you know, you haven't been to an eye doctor since you were 12. And here you are sitting in front of me at 45. Well, no wonder you can't read and you're not doing well in school and you can't get through the programming. So it's really taking that individualized approach to everybody and what do you actually need. And then if it's like I mentioned, if it's Suboxone, if it's methadone, if it's Vivitrol, whatever that person needs to be successful, we're gonna try all of our options. And like I said, it's universal, so you don't have to sit here and wait and get hooked on somebody else's medication because you're sitting over here craving. Everybody else has got stuff. So I think that helps us keep the amount of drugs coming in very, very low. And those who are going out to work, they're not coming back with stuff. They're not coming back under the influence. They have what they need to be successful.
So you've seen, you had this program, obviously you've had great success, and we can see why. You certainly probably have numbers as far as compared to for recidivism. How are those numbers to how they used to be in the past?
So with the addition of MAT and our educational programs, we've seen our numbers for what we call is return to custody. It's very hard for us to track folks who leave our custody not under the supervision of the Department of Corrections because we have no way to track whether or not they were picked back up by the county. Like we mentioned before, those are 2 separate systems. So they could be pulled over for OUI in a week and I would have no way to know that. So we call it return to custody. All of those stats are available to the public on our website. We have a pretty robust group of public data that we share. Our return to custody data is there. I shared with the group before that within the last 3 years, any woman leaving our custody with a degree has a 0% recidivism rate. So I think it's a combination of things. I don't think it's just this one thing that helps. I think it's adding the employment and the education and you know, helping them secure housing, which is our biggest hurdle right now. It's all those things that are helping our folks be successful.
And how's the population, how's the public feel about bed counts and beds? I mean, do you have what's the main, what's the population's feeling about incarceration? Are there too many beds, not enough beds? You need more, you need less? Or what do you hear on that?
Well, it depends on the day and who has the microphone, right? So it's,
right.
We have very, we have very active advocacy groups here in Maine, which I'm sure Vermont is very similar, who are abolitionists, and prisons should just be shut down altogether. And then you have folks saying, why aren't these people in jail? Like, you know, it depends on, you know, what article, what social media site you're on, whatever you're reading. So I feel like we have a pretty moderate, like down the middle, either you like us or you don't, you know, it's like one of those love or hate things. But at the end of the day, you have a place, you know, you can change my name, you can call me whatever you want to call me. But at the end of the day, my facility treats those who aren't getting treatment anywhere else. They are getting the mental health treatment. They're getting the substance use treatment. They're getting that case management. They're getting an education when, you know, they may have been expelled from school and they had a terrible experience with education. But now you have people saying, you can do this, but how can we help you do this? And they're very motivated. This is a very motivated population. They want to do better. Nobody wants to live in prison. Nobody wakes up in the morning and said, you know what, this is my life's goal. No, nobody, they're not saying that. This is a population of people who you have an active and a captive audience, and they can get a lot of really great work done because they're surrounded by people who really want to help them get that work done. So I would say that we have the right people in the right places when it comes to our department of folks who, we don't believe everybody needs to come to prison, but we also know that the places that they do need just don't exist in our communities anymore. We don't have extensive and intensive mental health treatment facilities. Those were closed down. Those residentials were closed down. The safe housing is also, there's a lack of that in the community. So again, you know, people will always be against things that maybe they don't fully understand or they're not fully educated on. You know, not everybody who walks around and says that they hate prisons and the ideas of this and they should shut this all down have ever actually walked inside and seen, you know, a correctional officer sitting with somebody who just found out that their mother died and they're the person that's consoling them, or walked past a classroom where you have 6 or 7 women who never made it past the 8th grade getting a high school equivalency. You know, really great things happen inside these walls, and that's not what hits the social media pages or the 6 o'clock news.
And as far as in the last 10 years, I think I remember 250 incarcerations, women incarcerated in Maine, roughly.
Yeah.
And that's been about pretty consistent. I mean, I know it goes up and down, but is that the number? Do you have enough beds now? You don't have enough beds, or it fluctuates, I understand, but how do you stand with that?
I would say I have enough beds. I wish I could convert some of those beds though. I wish I could take some of the beds that are in this higher custody section that I have and turn them into medical beds. I wish I could take some of the beds that I have over in another section and turn that into an intensive mental health unit. We do have one for the men here in the state. We just have not had the space to convert one for the women. So I wouldn't want to go any smaller than what I have for beds, because then I feel like I would be in a position that I might get, you know, when we were at our highest, things were very uncomfortable in here. We were turning 4 women rooms into 6 women rooms. And any of you who have ever been to college know, I was in a forced triple my freshman year, and 2 other women were more than I could handle. And I feel like I came into this world with pretty high resiliency. So I can only imagine folks who, you know, have high anxiety, are stressed out about where they are, can't get a hold of their families. You put 6 of them in one room. It was, I don't wish that upon anyone. So I wouldn't want to go any lower than what I have, but I certainly would want to reconfigure some of those spaces that I have. You know, just like we learned those lessons from the Women's Center. We learned we needed more program space. Well, now we've learned that I need some infirmary beds. I have a very aging population, a very sick population, a very infirm population, and I also have a very mentally ill population. So if I could have some acute beds, and we're getting there, we're working on some things here in the state to hopefully make that come to fruition. But that's what I would say, is that I don't want to lose any, I just want to convert some.
Who made the decision on the bed size when you did it? I mean, it was so when you decided, I'm sure there was numbers all over the place, and so then you settled, and how was that decision made?
So we did a feasibility study, right? So I was given the feasibility study that they did because it was the same company that did the one for the Women's Center. Even though I wasn't around, I was able to get my hands on that feasibility study. And I knew that we outgrew that space rather quickly. So when we got the feasibility study in for the second round, they said 75 was going to be enough. But I pushed and said, if we've got the money, let's do the 100. And we were able to pull off the 100. And I'm glad we did, because that year, that was my bubble. My bubble year was at 2017, since I've been around anyway. And I would much rather have folks in a minimum security setting than, jam-packed in a higher security setting. That's where the overflow ended up going, was down to that 100-bed facility. And we even had to convert a space there and put some bunk beds in a program room and kind of make a shelter style room for about an extra, 8 or 9 folks for a bit of time until we could get some folks out and transition them either to home confinement or they finish their sentence, whatever the case may have been for that individual. We did our best with what we had.
So it sounds like bed count really doesn't, the higher the bed count really doesn't make it that you can punish more people. It actually sounds like it's better for the people who are incarcerated because it gives you more options.
1,000,000%.
So you shouldn't be focusing on bed count, in your opinion, as far as to have less people incarcerated. It gives you more flexibility. Like you said, they said 75, but give me 100. I can do a better job with that.
I can do a better job. That's exactly that I can do a better job when I'm not worried about cramping and having to move people around because there's 100 conflicts. If I can focus on what's important and real for people during the day and not, playing the P game or swapping beds around, I don't want to do that. As an administrator, that's not what I show up to work every day. I'll do it because that's part of my job, but I would much rather focus on, programming and treatment and wellness of the population, and not we're miserable because we're crammed in here like sardines.
Yeah.
I'm curious, did you build every single one of your beds as your bedroom, your whatever they're called, doubles? Are they all doubles, or do you have some single rooms for people who are infirm or not well? I'm curious what the mix is there.
So we do, but only because I took beds offline to do that. So our single rooms were double rooms, but so that's what I end up doing is I take a bed offline to slide a hospital bed inside there because I no longer can meet ACA standards by having that a double room. So if you have the capacity, and we were able to do that down at the reentry center, I was able to build out larger rooms. So I still can keep them double, but they're much larger. So they're basically a triple, and that's what they can be if they needed to be. But I was able to put 4 of those in that space down the hill to give me that breathing room and to give me that. And that, so illness doesn't equate punishment either. I don't want people to have to move into a dark dungeness space because they've just had a surgery and they need to recoup from that. Well, that's not fair. We shouldn't, those things shouldn't be my only options, is that you are basically punished for getting sick.
But some of us might want to be alone. Is there any consideration of the fact that not everybody wants to have a roommate, or does everybody just get a roommate because we think that socially that's the best move for everyone in that condition?
We have to get creative sometimes. Sometimes if I have the space, like during COVID, everybody got a single. Okay. And then the numbers started to creep up and people got roommates again. So yeah, I mean, honestly, that's my biggest, for my unit manager, that's what she spends the most time doing is moving beds and managing personalities. I'll leave it at that because
I was an RA, so I remember those days where
exactly. I can't live with her anymore. Take me to SAG. Like, okay, we're not going to SAG. We need to figure this out. And then for our long timers, I 1000% agree with, sometimes they just need some space, right? You've been here 30 years. You need some time away. So we've done that. Like, okay, you get a single for the next year and just take some space. And we do, obviously, again, and that goes into the numbers. Like, don't cut numbers down because then you take options away. because, you know, and all these things come up, right? People get sick, or people just need time away, or so, you know, mental illness is tricky. Like, you could be in psychosis for a very long period of time, and or all of a sudden, you know, night terrors come up, and that's really triggering and traumatizing for somebody who has to share a room with that person. You know, you're 5 feet away from somebody who just wakes up screaming at 2 a.m. So giving yourself management tools is not a terrible thing. And that's really what it is. It's management tools, because the goal is to make all people well, not just the one person. Oh, well, she's fine because she's got a roommate, just let her scream. But there's safety issues too. Like, we have folks who come in with seizure disorders. We want to make sure that they have a roommate, because, you know, we only do checks every 15 minutes. Well, if somebody has a seizure within one of the checks, we want to be able to know that, because they're not going to be able to render help on their own.
Is all your population in state incarceration of people in state? Do you have any out-of-state incarcerated people?
I have no contracts with any other state.
Interested in moving to Vermont?
Yeah, I was gonna say. Amanda, Vermont's very beautiful, and you know, if you want to come and stay, we can't promise you we're gonna let you go home, but
We can yell on maple syrup.
yeah.
Be like Buddy the Elf. I'll just come for the maple syrup, right?
Committee, any more questions for?
Great presentation.
Inspirational. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's very helpful.
Yes, Joe.
For the record, Joe Adrian, Director for Design and Construction in BGS. I've been over there to Amanda's facility at least 3 times. It is a great facility. I think it's a great insight for Vermont to be looking at what we're looking to construct. But Amanda, could you explain the difference in security for both inside and outside between your 2 facilities? And also, what would you do different if you started construction today?
Great question.
Oh, Joe.
Or how about
the
that for lunch?
that's the only reason why he's never even toured the facility. He just comes for lunch. No.
We have the same problem over here.
So security wise, do you want like physical security stuff, or are you talking about like classification?
Oh, the physical security.
Okay, so my higher security building has a fence around it. It is technically a double fence, but there is a perimeter road between the two. It's an anti-scale fence now. It wasn't always, but we had, like I said, we had this new construction. So what makes it anti-scale is the spacing between the wires of the fence itself. So you can't like get a foothold in anything. So they say. Nobody's tried to prove it wrong, but that's how it was explained to me. We do have razor wire. We currently, and we haven't always had this, we currently have cameras throughout our perimeter that they pick up on movement. So we watch a lot of raccoons move during the night. So they're fixed on a pole, but if there's movement within the 360 of that camera, the camera actually will move and focus in on whatever the movement is. So we have those alerts for our central control. We do have a central control for the higher security building. We do not have a central control for the reentry center. The cameras that are placed at the reentry center do pipe into our central control up the hill. So if they notice anything, or if we need to go back, if we get a note that, so-and-so had somebody drop something off, we can go and go back. I believe it's 90 days. We have a saved camera footage. It's in the cloud. It's all there if we need it for 90 days. After that, just forget it happened. So the building down the hill, both buildings now are completely card swipe. So you have a card swipe access to get through most doors. There are some that can only be opened through control. So obviously anything beyond a certain perimeter cannot be card swiped. It has to be through control to make sure that it's not somebody trying to get out. What else? We have an internal security team. We call them the SI team, SII. They do they listen to phone calls. They review mail. They will do any of our internal investigations. They can do criminal investigations as well. We do have a detective that works throughout the entire campus. And he's a retired police officer. And that's what he does, is he just follows up. Honestly, he helps with the women's population. 9 times out of 10, he's helping them file protection from abuse orders. He's just a lovely individual, and the women really trust him, and he will take that paperwork over to the courthouse for them and file it so they feel safe upon release. There's a lot of times that he'll serve harassment notices on behalf of some of the women. So I'm grateful for him, just because of who he is and how he interacts with the population. We've had a lot less trafficking in, so mail, whatever the case, visits. We've had a lot fewer incidents since we've gone universal with MAT. I'll share this with this group, that we've actually had more Suboxone being trafficked out of our facilities since the universal MAT than trafficked in, because of the price is obviously a lot cheaper in here than it is on the streets. So we've intercepted a little bit of mail going out to folks in the community that have, a good stack of Suboxone strips inside, which I think we all were just really surprised by that phenomenon. But yeah, we have a dog, we have a canine who's imprinted on Suboxone and cocaine. I think there's like 4 or 5 things. And Joe, what else am I missing?
I
You
think
got me on the spot.
coming out of your day room area, when you have visiting day and whatnot, and how the women are able to take the family outside and, you just open the door and walk out.
Yep. So that's basically it. I mean, there is a fenced in area that they have, kind of like a yard. That way kids don't, I mean, we're literally on a pretty major highway or throughway. So we have quite a bit of traffic going by, but your rec yard is fenced in, so kids can't run out into the road. We do have cameras that do point into that rec yard. We do have cameras in our program space. We don't have cameras in like bathroom areas though. When it comes to visitation up the hill, we do have a metal detector. We have you have to go through 3 sliding doors to get to the visit room. The visits, we don't have anybody walk through. We don't even have a metal detector down at the reentry center. They just come in from the community. They are able to bring food in as long as it's packaged. So like they can pick up an order from like Olive Garden or a local restaurant and bring that to share a meal with their family. A lot of women will actually wait to have visits until they get to the reentry center, because it's like I just said, there's no metal detector, there's no razor wire. It looks like a residential office building if you were to drive by it on the outside. So for young kids, it's a lot less intimidating than a dog and a metal detector and all these loud sliding doors. So I totally don't blame them for waiting. We do, all of our bathrooms for visitation have spaces for lactation and spaces for changing children. So you don't have to put any child on the floor or feel like you have to cover up to feed a child. We do, I'm not sure if this is important, but when a woman gives birth with us, we do have a specialized visitation and birth plan for her. So the family can either bring in the baby. We can set up to get, if she chooses to pump, to get the milk to wherever the family is, even if the family's not able to. We have a community resource and they set up what's called a milk train. So we can get the milk, 4 hours away, as long as we freeze it and we put it in a cooler. And we just, like I said, it's all about that relationship building and what your community can offer you. So those are some of the things around visitation and what we do. And again, we have that team that kind of scans the visitors ahead of time. So maybe if we have a phone call and, there's a red flag for something. So, our team can go back and listen to phone calls from like the last 2 weeks to see if there's any talk of anything that we could get in front of.
The men and women are mirror images of programs, other than whatever physicality would restrict that, or are they similar, the programs?
No, they're very different. They're very gender responsive. Like I said, we really focus a lot on trauma with the women, where we, it's woven in on the men's side of the house, but it's so much more important. The average there was a large population of men who don't have an ACE score, so they have 0, and they have 1, 2, 3. So their ACE numbers are much lower than the women's population. So there's not as much focus placed on trauma on the men's side of the house. Obviously, sexual-based offenses look very different for men and women, so that treatment is very different as well. It's an individualized approach on the women's side of the house, and it's a group setting on the men's side of the house. So there are some nuanced differences between the programming that's offered. There's a lot more programming around domestic violence and interpersonal violence on the men's side of the house. There's a lot more relationship and boundary setting type programs for the women. So it's just, they do vary. But in terms of opportunity, I would say opportunity for both men and women are just as robust. When we talk about educational and vocational and employment opportunities, the women have equal, if not better, I would say at this point. When I first got here, I could not say that. 11 years ago, I couldn't. It was not equal. It wasn't even close.
So it sounds like you're having some success with the women, and I think you would allow yourself to say that. We certainly would say that. Do you think that there's the same type of success that you're having in the men's program?
I think now, yes. I think just I think the education coupled with the employment opportunities are really setting all of our population up for success in our communities. Our goal is to make these folks better neighbors, right? Like better community members. They don't have to walk out of here with a PhD to do that. But a lot of the skills that we're learning in the housing units and a lot of the changes that we've made within the housing units are making, it was no longer, I think historically you think of prison, it's every man for himself, right? You get in a room and you got to fight your way out. We're building communities. We're redoing infrastructure within our housing units to make them for them to care about someone else other than themselves, like the guy next door. And that's why we have opportunities where they buy food. We do Instacart pickup, and they cook food as a community and they eat together. And, just because, the guy next to you couldn't chip in as much money doesn't mean you can't offer a cup of sugar to your neighbor. So these are the types of values that we're trying to instill and model for our population. It's not just about, don't do drugs. It's about caring about where you live and who you're around and how you present yourself and being just a good human.
So I don't want to keep you, and I'm aware of the time here, but
Oh, it's fine.
I haven't heard you mention the transitional housing. How is that done there? That's a big issue here where, people get released and they're back out on the street and a week later they're back in jail. And how does this work in Maine?
I haven't mentioned it because I have no oversight over it. So that is probably as tricky here as it is there. We have a pretty good handful of sober living residences here in the state. We have some folks who have, bought up apartment buildings. We have some program, where a woman would have a room within a house that is a sober living residence. That would be the one thing. If I had a magic wand or, extra few million, I would pop up some, or I would rehab all these old schools, right? We have all these old schools in our state that have just kind of been abandoned that would make awesome apartments. And they're like near, you put schools in the middle of towns and cities, right? So they're near things, they're near jobs and stuff. So if I could just, win the lottery, that's what I would do. But I would say that is our biggest, it's housing and employment are the two things that are going to keep people from coming back to us. That, I know that. So that's tricky. Some of these folks they're able to go back to a home that they had, or a family member. And again, this goes back to those peer supports. We try to help them build community inside. So there's somebody waiting for them on the outside, and that might be a church, member of a church that we've gotten them. They could take a furlough pass to a community church here. We don't have to we go away, right? So we have to help them build community while they're in here. But that is tricky, especially when you're talking about those women who want to relocate because they were in domestic violence situations or very unhealthy situations. And we all know nothing changes if nothing changes. So, we do our best to encourage folks to kind of start again. And that's scary. One of the things that COVID's really, really hurt is our rent. Has gone through the roof. An apartment that was maybe $500 at the beginning of COVID is now $1,500. And we're now out marketing some of these folks. So really finding them a job that's a living wage versus a minimum wage is really what we're really trying to, really hone in on. In those vocations and those non-traditional workspaces is really where we're finding those jobs with salaries that can help them find, safe living. Anybody can get an apartment for $500, but it's probably going to come with some roach-like roommates and a terrible landlord, right?
I heard someone ask, did you get your question answered about what would be done differently?
Oh,
Did not.
Did you
Okay,
answer
well-
that? Or to be on spot?
yes. I would move 2 miles up the road. If I could just pick up my field and move it a little bit closer to the bus line, because that's been my biggest headache with employment is transportation to and from employment. Again, I don't have the staff to go around. I've gone through several taxi companies. Get me on public transportation or give me the staff that I can. When I was down in Alfred, we had staff, but that's all they did. They transported all day long. They were just on a loop and bus rides, and that's all they did. Which was, if that's what we're hiring for, and that's what this is the job. Like, hey, I need a taxi driver. Then great. But I can't even fill the post I have, so let alone hire somebody who just wants to drive around in circles all day. So those are, I think that for the pre-release itself, that's what I would do. If I had to redo the Women's Center, I would attach a whole host of specialized housing units. I would add that mental health acute. I would add the infirmary, and I would give myself probably 20 more beds for a buffer, because I don't really have that buffer to spread out like I'd like to when those folks really do just need time by themselves to stabilize on a medication or heal from a surgery, or I just had a baby and I have postpartum and I really don't want to be around anybody right now. So all those little things that come up that you can't really, it's great when people do feasibility studies, but they don't add in the human factor. Sometimes they add in, oh, this is what the stats say that your crime rates are going to look like. Well, that doesn't tell you anything about, the person that's going to commit those crimes.
Thanks.
Well, committee,
Thank you. Thank you.
Very, very
Thank you.
helpful.
thank you.
Commissioner Finch said you'd be very interesting, so I'm glad you came.
I've been called a lot of things, so I'll take interesting today.
Thanks for continuing to talk with us.
Amanda,
Hey,
thank you very much.
no problem.
Very impressive, and please keep up the great work, and I hope that we can adopt what you're doing.
Well, and come on out. Those of you, Joe knows how to get here.
Right.
He'll promise you lunch.
Your job offer is still here.
Me too now.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, take care. Thank you.
Committee, let's take a 5-minute break if it's okay. We're gonna